as us now, I'm with Professor David Robie from Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand. He's a professor at that university, an author of several books, and this is one of his books, Ice of Fire, The Last Voyage of the Rainbow Warrior, and importantly, he's also a journalist. So now we would like to ask you several questions regarding climate change and then the journalism itself. So as you see that today people in the world are facing one of the major issues in the world, that is climate change. And then the role of a journalist is to raise people awareness and then send like message to people that this is climate change and this is real, right? So yeah, so these are the questions. So the first question is, what are the major challenges in journalism itself to raise public awareness regarding climate change?
Well, I think the first thing is that the news media, April, has to focus enough information to empower people to make decisions and to take action. Action is needed. We're running out of time, and although the COP21 agreement in Paris was to keep the greenhouse emissions below no greater than under 2%, and preferably closer to 1.5 degrees centigrade in comparison to the pre-industrial era. The fact is we've already reached 1 degree and we're rapidly running out of time, and that's the reality. The news media itself is not terribly good when it comes to long-term planning and long-term issues. It tends to respond to immediate issues and immediate sort of consequences, and it lacks the attention span for something longer term.
Okay, right. And then how would you like to convince media to produce more contents such as news and media programs about climate change itself?
Well, I think that there are examples of how the media are working quite well in some countries, and I think of the micro-states in the Pacific. They've taken a lead in this way, and that's why the current COP23 conference in Bonn, the co-chair is President Boneke Bainimarama of Fiji, and he has taken very much the cudgels, if you like, on behalf of Pacific countries leading into this conference. And one of the things is about collaboration and cooperation between media and governments and strategic policies in the region. That's not to mean that that the media don't retain independence. They need to retain their independence, but on something as global, far-reaching as climate change is, it means a massive sort of response globally, and so the media needs to be part of that role.
Okay, and then and today is a digital age, as you see, and then what are the roles of media to increase public awareness and mobilize civil society to be aware of climate change?
Well, telling stories, and telling stories better, and making climate change a reality in terms of how people really perceive what is happening. I think there's been a tendency in the past to really focus on initially the scientific discussions and arguments, and for a lot of people in the public, they're rather lost by the detail. And then also the politics of climate change, in the sense of who's saying what, and particularly among the scientific fraternity, and then what politicians are sort of saying in response. But really it's about survival. It's about the human, our future as humans. And so therefore storytelling about ordinary people and what people in the communities are doing in action in terms of mitigation and adaptation as well to the reality of climate change, because those stories can then in turn be inspiring to other people in other communities and elsewhere in other parts of the world.
Okay, right. And then in your own experiences, what are the major obstacles for environmental journalists to produce news on climate change, and how to prepare them or young journalists to be unreliable journalists in this issue?
Well, I think there's a debate going on at the moment in terms of media generally, that that simply regarding climate change as a round or a beat, such as political journalism or even environmental journalism, is not enough. Today, climate change is across all disciplines, across all countries. Well, not exactly all, well, every country is affected in one way or another from climate change. So the problems are huge, and so the traditional way of journalism being structured into little boxes and journalists becoming specialists in those particular areas is not enough. And so a lot of the planning and thinking these days in journalism is about how to respond globally for eco-journalism, if you like, rather than environmental journalism about coping with climate change. And the media has to take a very active role in this. And unfortunately, some editors have treated it as not too boring or too long-term or not fast-moving enough to give the sort of attention that's really needed. So there's a fundamental rethink needed in media organisations and how they cope with climate change.
Okay, and then the last question, what do you think about the development of journalism in the Asia-Pacific region? And do you see any hopes to get people to become aware on the issue of climate change?
Well, absolutely. I think lots of things are happening very positively all over the place, and there are lots of journalists, there are conferences, there's collaborations between journalists, and also that these journalists that are working on climate change issues are doing some inspirational work that is very appealing to other journalists to give them ideas. And something like the COP23 conference that's happening at the moment, there's whole teams of journalists and there are various aid agencies and various other organisations that have funded journalists coming from, particularly from developing or small countries, or those countries that have micro-states, or those countries that are most at risk from climate change, those we might call submerging countries. Those countries that are particularly the front line of climate change, if you like, have shown a very strong response in the news media and among journalists, and I believe they will inspire others.
And then what do universities can do, and especially communication studies program can do to raise the issue of climate change?
Well, I think it's a tremendous challenge for communication studies, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, and the students who can actually sort of go and witness climate change issues and actually raise the issues much more widely, because in fact it's the younger generations that are going to be affected most of all, and I believe that there's a strong belief among younger people to discuss a lot more about climate change. And so the climate change as an issue among communication studies students is very, very good. I would like to mention that there are also collaborations between universities, such as UGM, for example, with CESAS, your own research centre here, and we've got a collaboration going with AET in New Zealand and the Pacific Media Centre with CESAS, and I think that's a huge contribution to awareness among students on both countries, in New Zealand and Indonesia, for example. And we also have a project that's been running for 2 years now called Bearing Witness. And the whole idea of that is we send young journalists, they've not really gone out into the media industry, they've just graduated and completed their degree, so they're just starting off in their journalism career, but they've got a very, very attuned awareness of climate change, and so we send them off to small states such as Fiji, where they immerse themselves in the issues of climate change among the communities there, and then they write stories and produce video reports and so on. So, and that raises the awareness around the region much more widely, but their own personal experience is a huge growth experience in seeing climate change as it's actually unfolding around communities and villages that they visit.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I just want to say congratulations to you and your team here at CESAS for both your enthusiasm and your hard work and your efforts at trying to raise awareness generally. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor David Robie.